So I'll just kind of repeat for the YouTube audience as well. This is probably one of the primary texts of our group and our approach. This is the precious treasury of the way of abiding, and it has four samayas that are in this text that you can essentially live by as far as your practice goes, which is ineffability, oneness, or openness if you're going to go in order. So, ineffability, openness, pure presence, and oneness. IOPO, I think they did it, yeah. They have the acronym there in case that's useful. Also known in Sanskrit as looks like Tattva Ratna Kosanama. All right. So these are the source verses, and there is a commentary on this, but I'm gonna go ahead and give the commentary because I fit it into kind of the curriculum and what other people I feel like these days are leaning into, which is, yeah, I suppose just speaking from my point of view, it's nothing special. But could you scroll just up a little bit so I can say the Tibetan name too? So in Tibetan would be Nalung Rinpoche Zöki Yawa. Okay. So homage to glorious Samantabhadra, primordial Buddhahood, the ground of fully evident enlightenment, unchanging, spontaneously present, the basic space of the Vajra heart essence. The nature of mind is natural great perfection. I pay homage to this, with nothing to discard or adopt, nothing to come or go. Now, there, Longchenpa is telling you what homage to Samantabhadra, that very first opening line, means. Samantabhadra, also known as Kuntazampo in Tibetan and Bhutanese, is the the all good. It's kind of known as the all good. And your mind now, the idea is that everything is perfect, which I know that sounds like a leap or it sounds very idealistic and perhaps has some other issues with that proclamation, but it's not really a belief. It's something that the yogi begins to see when the conditioned mind of confusion softens and exhausts within the nature of mind. The pure realm is here. Okay? There's no doubt about that. So, the expanse of the inexpressible nature of phenomenon, the very pinnacle of view, is great perfection. Listen as I explain, according to my realization, the meaningfulness of that which transcends everything and is unlike anything else. Excuse me. For the categories of mind, expanse, and direct transmission, the consummate meaning of the heart essence is that of ineffability, openness, spontaneous presence, and oneness. Each of these has four divisions, revealing the key point, discerning the implications, embracing the larger scope, and coming to the decisive experience. So I'll just explain that passage a little bit. This is a reference to Semde, Longde, and Mengagde, the three classes of Dzogchen, which I find almost useless up until this point because people are throwing all types of stuff in the mind category when really it's all three. And then they classify things as direct transmission when it's really the mind category. So I don't know how much use the three classes are having in kind of the mainstream Dzogchen world. That's not to say they're useless. I just think the misunderstanding and the misclassifications are useless because they're leading to confusion. So when you have a Dzogchen text, it's really talking about your conditioned mind and dealing with your conditioned mind, like stabilization practices and things like that. Then I think you can refer to the masculine Assemde mind class. If you're dealing with more intuitive and teachings dealing with phenomena, like even though Togyao's in direct transmission, I think it could fit into the expanse class just fine. And then remember also Togyao is now flipped almost as if people think that Togyao is more advanced than Trekcho. But this is a misunderstanding, and throughout history, Togyao has been placed very close to Kordo Rushin, so as a preliminary practice. Trekcho, the awareness practice, is the highest. Yes. Yes, this because and this is stated in this text, but as far as appearances resolving themselves, you don't have to pull light rays and align bindus and things like that to liberate phenomenon. That's just leaping into it in a very profound way when you work with these light rays and you do the Togya retreats. But when you rest in Trekcho, when you just rest in your awareness and you start to leave appearances alone within your awareness, well, then that whole light show is beginning to display itself. You're beginning to see past your reifications, and your reifications, that making of solidity starts to soften as well. And in that regard, you can just continue to leave your thoughts in awareness, let them be, but also emotional energy and the body and all the environment. So, all appearances. Let all four foundations of mindfulness just be, let them be. And then there's self resolution happening. So, there are four divisions of each of these, revealing the key point and all that. So, we'll continue. Of these, I will first demonstrate the theme of ineffability. The ineffable nature of things is that they are empty by virtue of their very essence. Now, sometimes people want to translate ineffable as non existence, and in that particular sentence, maybe they only read the first sentence. In that sentence, it would make sense. The non existent nature of things is that they are empty by virtue of their very essence. But even that doesn't really make sense. So, those are translators who are using that, I think it doesn't work in this context, in Longchenpa's context. You could use those various translations, but I think Choki Nimma's translations here are pretty good. And, if you read this treasury, you'll see that defining it or translating it as ineffability is the best. Non existence just doesn't work. And that goes for the other three too. Or actually, I think they do translate a few of these the same. I can't remember which ones because I don't really reference those other translations so much. I stick to these ones. So, in the vast expanse of awakened mind equal to space, however things appear, they are at the same time ineffable by nature. So, see what I just said to you? Leave appearances be, let them be ineffable. That means we can stop slapping labels onto them. We can stop engaging our mind with the sense world in such a deep way where we actually assign all this meaning to everything. Just let it be ineffable, whatever's going on in the world. If you're ready for that, that's the advice. So, are there any comments or questions so far? Okay, I'll stop periodically just in case there are comments and questions, but maybe through the during the reading, just don't ding in during the reading is probably best. We'll have little periods of of discussion. That way, um, I think there's a better flow to it that way. So, within the womb of basic space as an infinite sky, however, the universe manifests through transitions and changes in the four elements. These forms of emptiness are ineffable by nature, as are phenomena that are the manifest aspect of awakened mind. And of course, now we have different ideas of elements, but you can use the generalization. So, just as illusory images, while manifesting in any way whatsoever, are empty by nature and have no substance, so all phenomenon, the world of appearances and possibilities, even as they manifest, do not waver from awakened mind and have no substance. Just as dreams do not stray from sleep, and even as they appear, are by nature ineffable, the world of appearances and possibilities, whether of samsara or nirvana, likewise does not waver from the scope of awakened mind and has no substance or characteristics. Although phenomena appear as they do to the mind, they are not mind, nor anything other than mind. Now, how do we explain that? Well, all phenomena are the energy of your mind. So they're showing you what's going on in your mind, actually. It's showing you the co emergent appearances, the appearances of your mind. You have a question or comment?
Yeah. Is it kind of like saying appearances are not the totality of your mind, but they're a part of it?
Well, I think the main point here is that if yes, you maybe you can go back. Okay. Although phenomena appear as they do to the mind, they are not mind nor anything other than mind. So we have this experience of a subject and object, and so that subject and object makes a phenomenon appear to us. But really, even the subject in this case is a co-emergence of our mind. So it's never, I mean, just like when you can build a castle out of sand, it's never going to be anything other than sand. It's always going to be various things that you can build. You can build a person out of beach sand, you can make sand castles, all kinds of things, but it's never going to be anything other than sand. Although it appears to you as a sand castle, as a castle, it's the mind. It's sand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. And I'm sure Longchenpa will go into it. So, given their illusory nature as clearly apparent, yet ineffable manifestations, moment by moment, they are beyond description, imagination, or expression. This is me speaking. That doesn't negate scientific study and exploration either. In fact, so many scientists really come into science with this ineffability, with this open mind, and that's how they progress in a profound way. I feel like Nikola Tesla was a great example of somebody who just kind of let loose into ineffability, and that's how uh, these wonderful creations were able to come about from ineffability. But if we're very determined about how reality is, and we have our mind made up, and we have many kind of lagging inferences that are going on, well, in that case, we're going to have psychic walls everywhere, psychic boundaries everywhere that'll stop any kind of true flourishing of creativity or even our own freedom within non-duality, within the oneness. Because as long as we have psychic barriers, we cannot have oneness. And that's the thing about the political spectrum. It tends to create very hardcore psychic barriers. And I mean, here in America, things are so contentious that, we have these barriers to each other over the smallest. Even sports can create psychic barriers and have you kind of mad at somebody who's in your mind, who's a part of your mind, who's a reflection, a co emergence of your mind. So that's why Dzogchen is very, very radical in choosing peace and choosing compassion. It's very radical like that. It means compassion for all. And this is something I've had people bully me, I've had people who have wronged me, and I've had to let that go for the sake of my own liberation. And it's well worth it. So, for this reason, know that all phenomena that appear to the mind are ineffable, even as they manifest. And so, just as apparent objects are ineffable by nature, the nature of awakened mind, which perceives them, is in essence ineffability, like that of space. Yes, so all just one mind here, by the way, but let's say you perceive the object like this device or the screen that you're looking at right now. If you kind of just leave it ineffable, we can call it a screen for conventional sake, no problem. But ultimately, your mind doesn't cling to any kind of construct. And so, in that way, you're allowing the infinite to open up for you. And the awakened mind, the nature of mind, too, is ineffable beyond description. Uh, and you see, I could find right now, I could look up the four great samayas of Dzogchen, and many people think the first one is non existence. But how would that make sense here? Know this to be beyond description, imagination, or expression. It's defining ineffability. It keeps saying it's beyond description, beyond expression, beyond imagination. That's how you describe ineffability. That's not how you describe non existence. Excuse me. So, I fully, full heartedly believe that non existence translation is for some other context. I have seen it in a useful context, but you can stick ineffability in there too. Anyway, maybe I'm kind of nitpicking here at something that's not that big of a deal. Yeah, Gongshar, wanna chime in?
I always thought of like non-existence as a negation of absolute existence. But I guess there's the contextual thing, right? Like ineffable kind of implies that it's beyond proclaimed or it's beyond established existence, whereas non-existence might give give over to nihilism.
Yeah, well, I think ineffability has more to do with the concepts rather than existential inferences.
Mm.
So here, directly in the context of, are you thinking about this a lot? Are you conceptualizing this awareness stuff? And if you are, leave it ineffable, rather than asserting that it doesn't exist, which would be binding yourself to the tetralemma. You see, the four extremes. It would be binding yourself to the four extremes. That's why at first I was like, wow, that's a degeneration. Why would they define that great samaya as non-existence when clearly everything's always beyond the four extremes, all dharma,
Well,
you know?
doesn't like the kind of emptiness that Buddhism deals with is like the non-existence of a very specific thing, right? It's like
Yes, in that
non-existence of
context,
substantial.
exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It was cutting there. Go ahead.
No, 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 no. Just the non-existence of a substantial self. You know.
Yes, that's the context. Yeah, the substantiality, the fact that even in a glass of water, you can't really find where the glass is, where is its essence. If it breaks, it's a whole bunch of pieces. It's not a glass anymore. So that glass only existed as a construct. It never existed, and even that glass can then get disintegrated. So in that way, we can never really have anything that exists on its own, unbreakable, solidly, substantially existing thing. Yeah, and in that context, if you say there's non existence, for sure. And that's what throws a lot of people, actually. If you say the mind doesn't exist, but it's present, it's purely present, that will confuse many people. And then they'll think you're talking about some kind of eternalism. If you say that, the Buddha still has, an enlightened being still has their own mind, but it doesn't exist. So you're speaking in paradox. And to a Longchenpa, it makes eminently perfect sense. Okay, so uh, I'll read a little bit more here. Objective existence or subjective existence. Unless you're saying presence is an existence, but presence is usually a negation. We're saying that let's take the tetralemma, the four extremes. Your mind is here. We can't find where it exists, so we can't say it exists anywhere. But it's still present, so we can't say it doesn't exist or that it does exist. If there's a presence here of mind, like space, where does space exist? It's kind of everywhere and nowhere. And then, of course, the third and fourth are both and neither, both existence and non existence, or neither existence nor non existence. The idea really is that these are conceptual constructs. They're limited to time and they're limited to our, our conceptual kind of building blocks. That's why we don't want to limit the view to these four uh, constructs. So anyway, I think most of you are understanding that. So in naturally occurring timeless awareness, the ultimate heart essence, there is no causality, so the abyss of samsara is crossed. There is no better or worse, so samsara and nirvana are an integrated mandala. There is no error or obscuration, so the three planes of conditioned existence are seen through incisively. Enlightenment, the nature of mind, like space, is not defined by any extreme or bias, for it is non dual by nature. So there is no view to be cultivated, no samaya to be upheld, no effort to be made in enlightened activity, nothing to obscure timeless awareness. No levels on which to train, no paths to be traversed, no subtle factors, no duality, no dependent relationship. Since value judgments are transcended, there's nothing spiritual or non spiritual. This expanse, like the island of gold, in that it entails no differentiation or exclusion, is the naturally occurring nature of mind, like space, ineffable by nature and beyond all characterization and expression. Okay, I think we can pause there. Thank you so much, Yeshi. And notice the correlation that enlightenment is being spoken about hand in hand with awareness. So that's why we can actually point to awareness, pure presence. And if you have that recognition, you're recognizing your enlightened mind. So you may ask, well, why am I not enlightened then? Well, it's because you recognize the nature of the mind, but not necessarily the essence of the mind, which is empty. So you still have this reference point that likes to think and infer. And maybe that's useful, like I always say, is maybe like a womb that we're in, something we need to grow in or be a part of. But many practitioners, they're able to start to come into their enlightenment relatively smoothly through this Dzogchen approach. And yeah, so I think that was a great little introduction to ineffability. I hope you understand. Yes, exactly, kind of beyond the intellect. And some folks may not like that idea that it's beyond the intellect, but because they really like the intellect, and but this is not a negation of the intellect. So let's keep that in mind. And the intellect actually is hugely complemented by coming home to the basis of your mind. Then the intellect, in my opinion, functions a lot smoother. But you're also not attached to the intellect, because when the intellect inevitably perishes, this is what we call the intellect. It doesn't last very long, and that's why it's best to come into the home of your mind rather than the energy of your mind, which is the intellect.